Hi, welcome to Taylor Takes Tricks, and today I'll be reviewing Anansi. It's a game designed by Cyril Blondell and Jim Dratwa. It's a re-implementation of an older game, Eternity, and in both games, players will be trying to hit their bid as they play. In Anansi, players will be trying to outwit each other and telling stories to inspire their followers, and also possibly changing trump during the gameplay. Let me show you how to play, and then I'll go into my review. Here we have the deck for Anansi, where it's 1 through 14 in 3 suits. In order to set up a game of Anansi, first we're going to set it up by shuffling the player card deck. 2 of them are going to be put to this trump row, which will determine initial trump for the hand, and then 10 will be given to each player, or 8 depending on the player count. To decide, we're going to have follower cards that are uninspired for now, and then the given round's bonus, and that is if you hit your bid, you get a bonus points depending on the round. The first round is just 2. As you can see, there's 4, and then there's 7 out of screen. The lead for the first trick is just whoever's the youngest player, so maybe it's this player, and maybe they play the yellow 14. So Anansi is a must-follow game, and when it comes to you, you can either play to the trick, which I'll show now, or you can go get followers, which I'll explain in just a little bit. So if you play to the trick, it's must-follow again, so we would have to play that yellow here. This player would have to play a yellow, maybe they play that yellow. Coming to the final player, they don't have any yellow, so Anansi is not only a must follow, but it's also a must trump game, so they would have to play a card from the trump suit. And whichever of these 3 suits has the most cards would be what trump is. So say it was like this later on in the game, that would mean snakes is trump, but if it's tied, as you can see here, both 1 card and 1 card in the red and green suit, then it's just the leftmost is trump. So in this situation, this player would have to play one of the pink cards, maybe they just play this 1, and they would win this trick. The winning player will just take the trick and then lead to the next trick. Say that player led that, and now it's to this leftmost player. Again, they could follow suit, or we can show one of the different things you could do in this game, which is attempt to get more followers. So as you can see on the cards, there's 0, 1, or 2 of these symbols in the top left. And what that indicates is the number of followers you will get if you play that card for its followers instead of playing it into the trick. So say, for example, they wanted to play this card here, not as a card to the trick, but in order to get a follower. You can play any card when you want for followers, but to denote that it's a followers and not just a regular trick play, they recommend playing the card horizontally. So then coming to this player, again, maybe they wanted some followers, they could play this horizontally. And then finally, if it came to this player and they wanted to actually play to the trick, they could play this following suit like normal. To resolve this kind of trick, the person who won will collect the trick like normal. They'll just put a face down next to them. And then the players who played for followers would take the indicated number of followers. So if there was 2 on here, they would take 2, like in this 11, 12, or 13. Or if there was none, they could also just play it and then not get any followers. You might be like, why would you do that? Well, because after you get your followers, so say they got 1 follower from there, they then add this card to the tableau, which, as you can see, changes trump. So now the snake suit is trump. So then you would keep playing, like this player would then lead to the next trick, and you would keep doing this until you're out of hands. But then you might be wondering, what are these followers and how do they work? How followers work are you're trying to inspire them with your stories. And what the stories are kind of these tricks here. So if you win a trick and you have followers, or if you just got followers and you had a trick, you can put any uninspired followers flipped over onto your story pile. You can only do that once. You can't put 2 uninspired onto 1 trick. But what that means is this is now worth 1 point at the end of the game. Say this player also took a trick later on, then they can take this other follower, inspire them, and put them on top of that new trick. So at the end of the hand, these would be 2 points. Also, if the player didn't take like another trick and they didn't have leftover followers here, they hit their bid and they would get bonus points depending on the round. So if this was the second round, they would get 2 bonus points. If at the end of the hand you had more tricks than followers, you would just get that point and you'd miss out on the bonus. If, however, if you had more followers than tricks, you would actually get 0 points. After 3 hands, you see who has the most points, and that's how to play Anansi. Let's now begin the review for Anansi by covering a few positive points, the first of which is the bidding as you go. I really enjoy this system. I think it's actually my favorite way to bid. The way that players have agency over how many tricks they think they're going to take as they play and how they see their hand and how it's been going compared to the other players' hands. It's very helpful. There's also a fun idea of flexibility and not pushing players to bid on a hand right when they get it. I think this system really helps players, especially new players, find out the strength of their hand without having to really be forced or pigeonholed into something that they weren't 100% sure on at the start of the hand. Positive number 2 is how trump is determined in the game. It works in 2 interesting ways. It's nice how players have agency over what becomes trump, and how players can have possibly a weaker hand become a stronger hand later on. It's interesting also that when you go to get followers, whether 2, 1, or 0, you can play the card that has 0 followers just to influence trump. It's really interesting how players will be able to swing back and have a stronger hand when they don't expect it, and then try to have that bid as you go mechanic play into that and maybe try to get as many followers as they can now when they realize they might be taking more tricks than they expected. And now for positive number 3, I do want to mention the production quality on this game. All the cards are absolutely gorgeous, with the certain exception that will come later, but everything else is vibrant and shiny and just makes this whole aesthetic of the game something I've never seen before, and one that has brought many people over to the table just to see what we're playing, because it is so bright, vibrant, is so colorful, and it really is one of the prettiest card games, especially trick-taking games, that I own. For this game, I actually have no neutral points. The 2 bad points that I will point out later might actually be neutral points, or maybe even good points to certain people, but for now, there are no neutral points. Now moving on to the negative points, the first one that I have is the scoring. And you may have seen this, or could have assumed, the fact that the 2, 4, and 7 scoring isn't really intuitive. The hands don't really change, unlike other games where maybe if there's ramped up scoring, the hands do change. But since the hands are the same, it does feel bad that you could do super well earlier and just get less points for it. There are some variants that kind of try to fix this solution. There's one that's kind of like first past the post, where it's not 2, 4, and 7, but rather it's just 3, 3, 3. But the interesting thing about that one, which might be fun to some players, I didn't kind of find it as interesting, is that only one person can get the bonus, and that's the person who took the most tricks that also hit their bid. I kind of just wish it was just 3, 3, 3, and it was the same original scoring, just 3, 3, 3, as opposed to 2, 4, 7. Really, that's the main glaring issue with the scoring. I think 1 point per trick is totally fine, and there's an interesting flow that way, but that kind of pseudo catch-up mechanism just didn't really fly with me. The last negative point, and again, this may be a neutral point, like I was saying in the neutral point section, or maybe even a good point to some players, is the fact that this game has spiders. You may have noticed in all the censored material on the video so far, I'm not a fan of spiders. When I was young, maybe 9, maybe even 8 years old, I saw the movie 8-Legged Freaks, and it's given me a terrifying fear of spiders for the rest of my life. I do think that the graphic design could have less spiders. Spiders on the backs of the cards, spiders on the cover. They're really a little too much, a little everywhere, and I know it's part of the story, but please, game developers, no more spiders. Now let's talk about the variability to Anansi. And for me, the style of this type of game, it's pretty much average. Really, it's just the deal of the cards. And I would say that's standard fare for a trick taker. It feels completely fine. What is interesting and fun is how the trump gets determined can be pretty different depending on the game, so that can add a little bit of variance. For the main point, it's just the deal of the cards that would be the variance in this game. For player count, this is almost standard fare trick taker, where 3 was okay, 5 was good, a little bit much, but 4 was just that sweet spot. You kind of get the perfect amount at 4, where players are changing trump enough, but you get enough say in what trump is, not too much, not too little, and really the amount of tricks felt right. It never feels like it should be your turn more than it shouldn't be, like you're waiting too long or too short in a way. So again, classic trick-taking fare, I'd say 4 is the best player count. I must say this is one of my favorite bid-as-you-go trick takers, and again, if you've seen other videos, bid-as-you-go is my favorite way to do bidding. One of the interesting things where you can choose not only how many followers you get, but also what is trump, has such a kind of juicy decision where so much of that one card, it affects not just you or your future hand, but everyone else's, right? And everyone can kind of see that shared tableau of what Trump is as it slowly changes and kind of ebbs and flows and gets a card or two. And you can see Trump changing when it's coming, but also it's not too fast. It doesn't change too rapidly to be kind of chaotic. So there's a nice pace to the game where Trump is changing for sure. You can kind of see it coming and adapt to it. And you can also see what players are going for. If someone takes 2 followers, 3 followers, 4 followers, you can get a sense of what they think their hand is and try to block them and try to take their tricks and go the other way that they're making Trump. If they put 2 snakes or 2 green up into the Trump, you can pay attention to that and try to either counteract it with what you put up into Trump, or maybe just slough them more tricks than they don't expect. There's a lot of interesting card play and open information that players can kind of suss out by how players play. A lot of time I've also played with people bluffing. They play a bunch of like snakes or bees, and they're using those cards to go into Trump because they want to make a super weak hand and only get 2 tricks, right? And then hit that bid because they care more about the bonus points from the bid than they do the trick points from hitting a bunch of followers, right? So there's a lot of interplay. I think it's a perfect amount of twist onto a standard trick taker. I think you could show this to anyone. I love bid as you go because they're helpful for new beginners and almost intro to trick takers. This might be a little bit on the complicated side. I don't know if I would show this to intro trick takers because the Trump flow and the nuances of it and knowing maybe how to bid as you go is a little bit much, but again, this is just such a fantastic bidding as you go game, and I think I fully, wholeheartedly recommend it.